Hello, my name is Christina Malinzi. Thank you so much for joining me today. Yes, you heard that right. This is my new name, and in today's video, as you saw from the title, I'll be sharing my testimony. My walk with God so far, where we're at right now, and how I got to this new name, and everything else. Okay, thank you so much for tuning in. First things first, before we even dive into it, I would like to please ask you to subscribe to the channel. So if you're watching this right now, please hit that subscribe button. So let's begin. So we'll start first with a bit of a background story of my Christian journey. I did grow up going to church Sundays, and then for Catholics, for those of you that know, we have to go through the whole process of like communion, getting your first communion, confirmation, and all that good stuff. So I've went through all of that, and I do feel as though the way I would go to church when I was a child, it was more of your parents telling you like, Sunday we have to go to church, and that's that. I never really felt like I have a personal relationship with God. I don't know, but I'm still grateful that my parents push me to go to church, because at the end of the day, I still have that background, and I've always known that God exists, that Jesus died for our sins. So I've always, known like the basics of Christianity, and so I'm thankful for that. Around the age of like, teenage years, like 15, 16, I started drinking, I started going out and all that good stuff, and then I just never went to church again. Like I stopped going to church when I was around that time, and I never went to church again. Like my weekends would just be going out and drinking and all of that stuff. Background story. And then fast forward to 2022. So I was still going out, all that good stuff. And then my friend of mine, Raisa, shout out to you. Actually, she started her YouTube today, actually. So I'm gonna link her channel so you guys can support her. But she basically invited me to her church, and at that time, I was not working yet. I had no job. I was home. Throughout my life though, even though I wasn't going to church, I would still pray. So prayer has always been a part of my life. Like I would always, I was that Christian of like, when something is going wrong, I would always be the person to turn to God and be like, God, like, please, like, help me out here, right? And I do see like throughout my life, the hand of God, obviously. I've always been the girl that prays, like always, like at night, like I would say like throughout my life, I would still, before I go to bed, I would pray and be like, God, thank you for the day, that sort of thing. It's just that I was not like, that committed, like not going to church, like, going to church and all those things. So I went that Friday night. It was very intense. Like anybody that goes to those churches that have those like night kind of prayers, basically you're like up until 3-4 in the morning, then they wouldn't understand the intensity. But basically it was very intense. People were screaming, people were on the floor like praying, crying. It was praise and worship. I was just like, oh my gosh, like, because for Catholics, like our church, like the Catholic Church, it's very reserved, sort of quiet, conservative. Like we don't, we have we have a choir, of course, but it's just not the same as this church that I go to. How did I feel after the first night? I thought it's okay. I would say though, the plan was like, okay, I'm never gonna go back. That didn't happen, because I did now end up going on a Sunday, and I would just go, like I wouldn't say like I was going every single Sunday. I would just go like some Sundays. Like it wasn't the thing of like, oh yeah, like on Sunday I have to be at church. No. So some Sundays I would go, some Sundays I wouldn't, and then some days I would also go like Bible studies on Thursdays. Even though I wasn't like going religiously, I do feel as though like little by little, internally I was being transformed. Like internally I was being restored, right? Because I just, from the time that I was having, I just felt like this pull, like God was like kind of like pulling me to kind of like get closer to him, right? And so that's why I do think that spending, going to church, being in the presence of the Lord is very, very important, right? There are some Christians who, they're like, I'll just practice in my house. I don't need to go to church or anything like that. I feel even though I wasn't going religiously, I did feel like little by little, like internally, I was being transformed to just being this person that is curious about God, and I want to know more. Like I want to read about him. I want to, I'm just interested to, find out more things and just get closer to him and just kind of like change my life for the better, right? And so before I did a video and I talked about my drinking and stuff and how I felt as though God was like very sadly just asking me not to drink anymore. What I'm learning about God is that God is a gentleman, right? He's not gonna push anything in. He's not going to like push you into doing anything. The way he does it, at least for myself, my experience, it's suggestions. It is little nudges of him pushing you towards the right direction, right? And so that was for me when it comes to drinking. It was not him like saying like, oh, like I would still drink, I would still go to church, and I was still fine, I was still happy, right? So it was never a thing of like, oh, I'm gonna make you suffer and da da da. Like that just hasn't been my experience with God. It was just more of like, have you considered this? Like, what if you'd stop? Like more like a question, right? So anyway, so I talked before about how entering 2023, January of 2023, and then from that I was feeling so amazing, I was feeling so good not drinking, that I was like, okay, I'll just keep going. And so I had February, and at some point I was like, you know what, I'm just not going to drink anymore. So then I just had I took 3 months off, and then I drank on my birthday. So that was April last year. I was like, it's my birthday, it's okay. And even that specific night, I just maybe I think had like 2 drinks, and then it was a birthday, and I went home after that, and then that was it. But then I think from that was like I would take like a few weeks off, and then I would get back into it again, take a few weeks off, get back into it again, kind of thing. So for example, like I had like a sober September, whatever. But then I do feel as though even though I was going to church, and even though I was feeling like I'm getting closer to God, take time, to like read the Bible, take time to pray, take time to worship, I was still like living, I would say, like another life where I felt as though God was not happy with, right? And that was just me still being out and about in these streets. Okay, if you are a Christian and you're still you go to church and you're still living that life, I would say each person, your convictions are gonna come at your own time, and you just keep being you, like be who you are. I just trust that when the time comes, when for yourself, when God is will start pulling you towards the right direction, he'll pull you towards that direction. That's it. But for me personally, I just felt as though the life that I was living, I felt like, for example, I would go out like on a Saturday, right? And then Sunday, of course, I'll go to church, and then I would come back home and I would feel horrible, like absolutely terrible. Like I would just feel like, oh, like basically like this like a two-faced kind of person, like, you know what I mean? In church, all sorts of people are going to church, obviously. I've always, like since the day one, I always felt like I belonged, right? Because my church, they're super welcoming, super loving. So it wasn't a thing of like, I'm not welcome. I'm very much welcome. But then at the same time, it was just a feeling internally of feeling like I'm not good enough, to be around these people because of this other life that I know that I know I'm living, right? So it was just me, myself, kind of like guilt and shame that I was experiencing. That was very, very painful. It was very, very painful, right? And I was struggling with that for months. I wouldn't really talk to anybody about it. I always wanted to do a video and have a video on YouTube and just talk about my identity and how I'm struggling. At the same time though, I did also feel as though that with this channel, I'm always like offering I'm always sharing like different tips, sharing advice on different things. And so I felt like, okay, if I'm going to get on the channel and talk about identity and talk about struggles of identity, if I don't have a solution, then what is the point? I don't want to come on here and just speak negativity and kind of like be that state that I was feeling like a victim and just end it there. I always want to be the person that I can share how I'm feeling, I can share what I'm experiencing, but at the same time I also want to leave you who is watching with like advice that you can apply for your own life, right? And so even though I was struggling with that for months, I did not feel comfortable talking to anyone about it. I didn't feel comfortable doing videos about it or anything like that, right? So that was just the year of 2023. Honestly, I can just say that in general, like the year of 2023 for me was just a year of endings, like a lot of endings, because I can also even had a relationship that ended that year of 2023, May specifically of 2023. And so that ended in that year. But also I also felt it was also like a shedding of like different habits, I can say, that I knew didn't please God. And the suffering that I was experiencing for me was just not worth it, right? Like the pain that I was experiencing was just not worth it. I'm like, why do I have to go through this, right? So basically how I got the name was that I was in church, I was all the way in the back, and it goes to show like God doesn't matter, like if he will just meet you, he'll meet you where you are, right? But basically the lead pastor of the church just kept calling, who's also my spiritual father, kept calling, Christina, Christina. So usually, people can go. So sometimes, he will call people by, for example, it can be, if you're, maybe you need healing in this area, so he'll call people, those people to go to the front. Or he could call people by their name and say go to the front. Or he could say, for example, if you've been having encounters lately, go to the front, that sort of thing. So basically he was calling Christina to go to the front, but then nobody was going. So he kept calling Christina, Christina. Nobody was going to the front. And he kept calling Christina, Christina. And then it's like, your name is Christina, like you need to come to the front. And then nobody was going. And actually at some point, because I was like, because the thing is that those prayers were praying for long hours, right? At some point I was like, I'm just gonna go use the washroom, I'll come back after. My name is not Christina, so I'll just come back later after. So I went to use the washroom, I came back, and then he was standing right behind my chair. And I was just like, oh, okay. So I just went around and I was just standing in front of my chair and I kept praying. And then he pulled me and he went to the front. And then he started, prophesying, declaring these amazing, wonderful things over my life. And he said, from now on, your name is going to be called Christina. And that's how we got the name Christina, right? I do want to do another video talking about the name and the reason why I had to go through that name change and everything, but that'll be for another day. So of course I went home that night and right away I was googling like, what does this name mean? And it means follower of Christ. Of course I was so moved that day. I was so touched. I was crying for hours. I was so thankful because that's exactly who I want to be. And that was just validation from God, letting me know that you're on the right path. And you're my daughter, I love you, and we're gonna do this thing together, right? So that's where I am at right now. What I'm learning about this journey, it's not about perfection, right? The truth is we can never be perfect. Like that is literally impossible. It's all about the things with God. He's a forgiving God, he's a loving God. And when you come to him, when you've done a mistake and you come to him and you say, Lord, I messed up, I'm sorry, he forgives right away. He doesn't even remember what you did, right? So it's not about perfection, it's just about a willing heart. And that is where I am right at this time. I've just opened my heart to receive God, receive Christ, and just live better. Am I saying that from now on I'm just going to be this perfect person that will never make mistakes? Absolutely, positively not. But it is a new year, and there are just certain things that I know, because part as well of being a Christian is saying yes to some things. And when I gave my life to Christ, that was me saying yes, right? But then as well, it's also knowing so this is actually one of the pastors at the church, Pastor David. That's what he said to me. He's like, with being a Christian, you're going to say yes. So giving your life to Christ, that is a yes moment. And then there are going to also be no moments. For example, Christina, do you want to go to this club? Then that's my moment to say, no, I don't want to do that because I don't do that anymore. Do you want to have this drink? No, I'm not going to do that because I just don't do that anymore. Can we have sex? No, I don't want to do that because that's just not something that I do anymore, right? It's not to say that it's going to be this perfect ride. No, it's just that it will be me just praying to God for the grace, of which I pray for the grace every single day. And trusting that the grace will be sufficient. Okay, so that is that. I also want to talk a little bit about this channel. I feel I'm being called to moving forward, right? So I'm always craving to be consistent, and it's extremely hard. It's very difficult. That is what I'm aiming for this year of 2024. Just being more consistent, but also just post like more faith-based content. So talk about God more, talk about Jesus and my journey with him, right? So I feel as though there are a lot of people that may want to come to this club, this other side. That is absolutely amazing. And just talk about that. We can talk about different Bible characters. We can talk about different scriptures. I also want to have have guests on as well, and then we can just be talking about different topics, talk about relationships, talk about purpose, talk about prosperity, all of that good stuff. Thank you. I just want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I'm going to ask you to please hit that subscribe button. Okay, thank you and goodbye.